Okay. Good evening. I'm James Maroney from CollegeTreasure, and tonight I'm very excited that we have us joining on our Facebook Live, Ferne Bork, the Assistant Director of Admissions at Landmark College, Landmark Colleges in Vermont. Ferne will tell us more about the school, but she's going to share her experiences from two ways, really. One as an assistant director of admissions at a college, and the other is as a mother of a neurodivergent student. So, Ferne, thank you so much for being here. And for those who are listening, if you're listening on Facebook, please feel free to put your questions in the chat or in the comments. And then if you're watching us on our Zoom here, just put your questions in the chat. So, Ferne?
Thanks, James, and thank you to all who are joining us tonight. I have a whole presentation prepared for you, but before I do that, I would like to share a little bit more of my personal story. My son, Aaron, who is now an adult, actually, he's 29 years old, has ADHD and executive function challenges. As he was going through school, a couple of things were really apparent to me. One was that he was incredibly bright, and the other was that he had very little in the way of executive functioning skill. Time, deadlines, planning, those were all really, really difficult things for him. And so I did something that many parents in my shoes have done before me and will do after me. I took a very, very primary, and in my particular situation, over-involved role in his education. And what that meant is that when Aaron came home from school at the end of the day, I'd give him a break, but then I stood over him well into the evening, making sure that the homework got done. I was the homework queen, and you can imagine how popular a parent that made me. Early in the winter of 2010, Aaron was a junior and he was getting ready to explore college, as were many of his friends. And I had this horrific moment in which I realized that what I had done was made sure that Aaron could never develop any executive function skill of his own, because I had essentially become his executive functioning. And in that moment, I also realized that he was going to need an incredibly supportive college program, one that would just not just accommodate, but would help him build the skills that he was lacking and so sorely needed. So I joke that I dragged him to an open house at Landmark College, where we sat in an audience filled with families very much like our own, and as I looked in the eyes of other parents, I could see the same hopes and fears that I had for Aaron. I was there a very short period of time when I breathed a sigh of relief and felt like I had found the perfect fit, the perfect program for Aaron. And those of you who are parents will not be surprised when I tell you Aaron felt equally sure that we had not. And he said, no way am I going to that college. But he also knew that the best way of dealing with me was to offer up a compromise. So that July, Aaron attended Landmark's high school summer program, where he got to take a few classes, where he was immersed in residential college life. And I have to say that he went with only one thing in mind. It was to come back with one of his very famous lists, the list in which he had all the reasons why Landmark was a terrible place and why he wouldn't be going. But it took many years to find that out because it didn't work. Aaron got on campus, fell in love with Landmark. In particular, even beyond the way that we teach, he fell in love with the community because it was such a relief to be somewhere where everyone got it, everyone understood. His peers got it, the faculty and the staff got it. So Aaron attended Landmark as a first-year student in the fall of 2011. He earned his associate degree in 2013 and then transferred to American University. So I tell you this story not because I believe that Landmark is the perfect fit for every student, because certainly it isn't. But because of Aaron's journey, I came to understand how incredibly important it is for neurodivergent students that they find a good college fit. Now, you could say to me that, well, that's true for any student. And in a certain sense, you would be right. But for neurodivergent students, it can be the difference between earning that degree that they're pursuing, or at the other extreme, turning their back on college, concluding that they simply aren't a fit, when the truth is that they weren't a fit for the particular college that they were attending. So with all of those experiences and thoughts in mind, I created this presentation to give counselors, families, and students the tools to which that they can use when they're looking at various colleges during that whole journey, and so that you have ways of evaluating that are really, really effective. So with that, I am going to begin sharing my slides. Oops, let me share one more second. You would think we'd have this down, or I'd have this down after all this time. And there, so it is coming in and out. James, are you seeing the slides? Because right now it's telling me that I'm sharing, but I don't see anything. Now I do. Shake your head if you see it, James. Good. Great. So what I'm going to be talking about tonight is navigating the college search for students who learn differently. Albert Einstein said, everybody is a genius, but if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will live its whole life believing that it is stupid. And so it is, I think, very often with neurodivergent young people. They compare themselves often and frequently unfavorably to their neurotypical peers, as though they weren't as intelligent or as capable. We know that nothing could be further from the truth. Growing evidence and emerging research tells us that these cognitive traits that we group under the heading of neurodiversity represent adaptive strengths in many contexts, contexts like the arts, STEM fields, business, technology. I don't mean to minimize the challenges that they also present, but in the right setting, with the right support, they can enable students to flourish and contribute in ways that traditional learners may not. Now, the key words here are right setting and right support. So how do you determine what that is for any individual student? Well, that happens to be the reason that I recommend that all students begin the college search as an inner journey, as a journey towards greater self-awareness, a journey of self-discovery, in which they're asking themselves the really important questions. Why am I going to college? What do I want to get out of my college years? What kind of environment do I learn best in? What are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? And most important of all, what are the accommodations and supports that I need if I am to best ensure my chances of success? I'd like to paint a picture with the numbers. In high school, 94% of students who have a learning difference are receiving some kind of assistance. And despite that, roughly only 25% go on to utilize the resources that are available to them in college. There are a multitude of reasons for that, and I'll get into that a little bit later, not the least of which is that the process itself is very likely to be cumbersome at most colleges. But I want to take a moment to look at post-secondary outcomes. What happens to students who continue their education beyond high school within 6 years of their graduation? 51%, and only 51% of all students neurotypical and neurodivergent, earn a post-secondary degree. About 38% of students who have specific learning disabilities do, and about 35% of students with ADHD and students who are on the spectrum. A multitude of things contribute to that, but there is one contributing factor that we have the ability to do something about, and that's support. We know that students who receive support from the beginning, they've disclosed they're receiving accommodations, have a much better chance of success. And conversely, students who wait until after their first year to request accommodations, one state university study showed they had 3.5 times the risk of not graduating within 6 years. So improve the odds, access and utilize support. It's important that you understand the college support landscape because that too changes when students get to college. I think of it as a pyramid, and at the base of the pyramid are all 4,300 or so institutions of higher education, all required by law to provide accommodations. Accommodations can be things like extended time for tests, a reduced distraction environment for test taking, sometimes a note taker. What's really important to know is that the accommodations will vary from institution to institution. So it becomes really important that you match a student's needs to the accommodations that a particular college or university is offering. Going up that pyramid, there is a subset of these 4,300 institutions that in addition to accommodations offer some kind of skill building. It can be coaching, advising, a writing or a math lab. Data shows us that students who receive this additional kind of beyond access support are more successful than students simply receiving accommodations. An even smaller subset of institutions are traditional colleges or universities, but they have within them some kind of structured program of support for students with learning differences. These are more comprehensive types of programs. And so whereas accommodations focus to a large extent on remediation, these kinds of programs focus on skill building, which is important not just to college success, but success after college as well. An important thing to come in mind is that many of these are based on a fee for services. So you need to be sure you're looking at every service that your student might possibly want to use and looking at the costs that will incur as you evaluate these colleges. And then at that very peak of the pyramid are post-secondary programs, and only 2 colleges, 2 four-year colleges in the US that are devoted exclusively to neurodivergent students. One is Landmark, where I am from, and the other is Beacon College in Florida. At both of these colleges, all accommodations and beyond access supports are actually embedded in the natural teaching and functioning of these institutions. These are the most comprehensive programs of support at the same time that in terms of their liberal arts curriculum, they are completely traditional and as rigorous as any college or university a student might be exploring. In addition to looking at what services a particular college or university provides, I recommend taking a look at who's providing the services. In the majority of cases, it's peer tutors who are chosen because they're content experts, but rarely have they been trained to teach unique learners. And believe it or not, the same thing is true of faculty. Most often they have no specific training in teaching students who have learning differences. Only about 4% of the time are services being provided by learning specialists. And in some cases, I think this makes a huge difference. Another one of the things that changes as students go from high school to college is the legal landscape. In K through 12, it's the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act and Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act that protect and define a student's rights. When that student gets to college, the Americans with Disabilities Act takes over for the IDEA. So how are they different? The IDEA is a federal law of entitlement. It looks at education as a right. All students are entitled to a free and appropriate public education in the least restrictive environment possible. The district is actually charged with student success. They are responsible then for identifying students who are in need of services and having those students evaluated. Based on the results of the evaluation, a team comes together in which parent involvement is welcomed, and that team creates either an IEP or a 504 plan for the student. The IEP is actually a legally binding document. It requires annual meetings to formulate goals, to review progress. Students on the basis of an IEP can receive a modified curriculum, and IEPs are by law required to have a transition plan. So now your student gets to college. The ADA is a federal civil rights law. The Americans with Disabilities Act prohibits discrimination on the basis of a disability. It's designed not to provide success, but to provide access. And it doesn't look at education as a right. Students must gain admission solely on the basis of academic merit. And the reason for that is that, unlike in high school, college curriculums are not modified. The high school IEP or 504 plan is not legally binding when a student gets to college. And if a student wants to receive accommodations or any kind of services, the responsibility falls completely to them. They must disclose, they must self-identify and provide whatever documentation a particular college or university requires. One of the really big differences for students is that probably for the first time for many of them, their parents are no longer going to be involved. And parents have been on the front line advocating for these students. That's a really, really big change.
Fern,
Yeah.
if I could just interrupt for 1 minute, we did have
Sure.
a question. If you could just clarify what an IEP is for those who are listening who may not know what an IEP is.
Sure, an individualized education plan. So it takes that evaluation that the school did, and it puts in place accommodations and services to support that student and ensure success. That's one of the reasons that based on an IEP, a student can even have a modified curriculum. A 504 plan does many of the same things, except it's not a legally binding document. So it's a little bit different in that sense. So how do you prepare a student for the transition? First and foremost, a student must understand their learning difference, but not just understand it, be able to articulate it when they are sitting in front of somebody from disability services. And that's one of the reasons I always recommend that students take as active a role as possible in their IEP or 504 plan meetings while they're still in high school. They should have the opportunity to speak about their accommodations, how well they're working for them. And if they feel up to it, I even advise that students should try leading those meetings, because the more confidence they build doing that while they're still in high school, the more likely they're likely to be of their ability to do that to disability services when they get to college. The other piece of preparing for the transition is we know, again, from data, from studies, that the more specific a transition plan is about the accommodations a student's going to need when they get to college, the more likely they are to not just access those accommodations, but to continue to utilize them. So if your student has a 504 plan, which doesn't require that kind of transition planning, you can still go to your student's counselor and ask them to, in writing in the 504 plan, please specify the accommodations that this student is going to need in college. The other piece of a smoother transition is finding a college that's a good match, which means understanding what the student needs and expects from their college years and finding a college that aligns with those factors. Remember, access impacts success. A question that often comes up whether I'm talking to families, to students, or to counselors is, when should I disclose? Should I disclose? So the very nature of the question started to make me wonder why students might be resistant to disclosing. So there are a myriad of reasons. One is that many students have felt like their identity has been very tied to their disability status throughout their education, and they're looking forward to college as a way of creating an identity that's independent of that. Another thing, of course, is stigma. Students are concerned about stigma. Will other students think that they're lazy, or maybe even that they're getting an unfair advantage when they get extra time for test taking? They may also be concerned about how faculty will look at them. Some students believe, and falsely so, that they've outgrown their disability. The important thing to remember is that these learning differences are brain-based. As time goes on, what we hope for is that students develop skills to meet the challenges that their learning differences present, but they don't, in fact, outgrow those learning differences. But finally, I think the most detrimental reason students don't disclose is that they are likely to underestimate just how important these accommodations are to their success. So while choosing the right time to disclose is very much a personal choice, I recommend disclosing early because it gives you the best opportunity to evaluate not just a college's services, but the attitudes of the college towards learning differences and towards students who have these learning differences. How easy or hard it is to get an appointment with disability services will give you a certain amount of information in and of itself. So I recommend disclosing before admission. Now, some people are concerned that if they do that, it will reduce the chance that they will be admitted to a college. So a couple things you should know about that. One is that it is illegal to deny an admission to an otherwise qualified student based on a learning disability. Can I say it never happens? No, I can't. But if a college, and this is my personal feeling entirely, if a college were going to deny admission to a student on that basis, I'd be concerned that it's not a college that I could count on to provide the support the student needed for success. So I personally would not hesitate to disclose early. So evaluating disability services at a particular college. The first step is identifying the services you need. And as I mentioned earlier, it starts with that inner journey the student is making. But in addition to that, the IEP and the 504 plan can be really valuable resources. So students should take a look at those plans and see what services they are providing and evaluate whether they are using all of those services. In some cases, they aren't. They should come up with a list of the services they think that they need. And I would also suggest that they ask the people who know them best to do the same thing. Parents, teachers, counselors, and out of all that input, put together the final list of what it is that the student is looking for. At that point, they will begin to work with either or both their counselors at school and perhaps an independent educational counselor as well. But go beyond that. Start exploring college websites. You know, if you put in searches like best colleges for students with ADHD, you will get a wealth of really great results. So as you explore those college websites, take a look at both disability services and universally available services, because students generally are using a combination of the two. Get more information that is available on the website. Call or email admissions. Same thing with disability services. And as part of your exploration, determine the location of disability services on campus. You would be surprised, but there are many instances in which that team or that department is located far outside the physical mainstream of the campus. And when that happens, even after students access those services and get those accommodations, they're very much less likely to continue to use them. Another great resource as you're investigating is the K&W Guide to Colleges for Students with Learning Differences. I particularly like the index at the back of the book, the appendix rather, because it groups schools according to level of support. So you can narrow down the large number of schools that the K&W Guide reports on. Your high school may have that guide available. If not, your library can get it for you, and it's also available for purchase on Amazon. Many students are exploring a good number of colleges, so I recommend strongly that you find some device for keeping track of the information that's gathered. The Landmark College Institute for Research and Training has come up with this evaluation worksheet, which, James, I will be supplying to you after tonight, and you can distribute it to attendees. But it gives you the opportunity to keep track of each and every institution you explore. Write down the name of disability services at that particular college or university. It varies from institution to institution. Keep track of the level of support, the office hours for disability services, the number of staff. That will tell you something about the availability and accessibility of services. Keep track of the particular accommodations and services offered, and then do some evaluation. Parents and students might want to do this piece separately. What are the pros of the institution, the cons? What other notes do you want to make? And finally, give it a star rating. You'll really appreciate good tracking when you go back to start reviewing all the many colleges that students may be exploring. It's important to know that evaluating accommodations is an ongoing process. Students should have regular meetings with the appropriate person at that particular college to discuss how effective the accommodations are. Students should consistently monitor the extent to which their accommodations are genuinely providing access to course content. And if they see that at any point access is diminished, it's time to go back and self-advocate. Again, this is not a one and done process. There are other things to take a look at beyond the kinds of things I've already mentioned. One really important factor is student life and campus connectedness. What is the culture like on campus? Is it welcoming? What are attitudes towards students with learning disabilities? What is student life like? So much of learning at college happens outside academics, outside the classroom. So is student life able to provide your particular student with the activities that will nurture current passions while giving them the opportunity to be exposed to new things so that they might also develop new interests, new passions. What is the availability of social pragmatic support for a student who is on the spectrum? That can be key to success. Some students who are on the autism spectrum don't really need support in academics, but if they're to thrive, they need to further develop social, interrelational, and communication skills. Mental health services, I think, are incredibly important. I think that's always been the case because even when you find a good fit, college has the potential to be a stressful experience. However, students who have learning differences, there's also frequently a mental health component to that, such as anxiety or depression. In addition, last December, the Surgeon General issued an advisory regarding the urgent mental health crisis in our children, adolescents, and young adults. While that certainly preceded COVID, things became very much exacerbated during COVID. We saw symptoms of depression and anxiety double. And who is most impacted by that? The most vulnerable populations. And people who have disabilities are included in that vulnerable population. In addition to increases in anxiety and depression, irritability, impulsivity, all of that increased. So make sure mental health services are easy to access on your student's college campus. At Landmark, 60% of our students are utilizing the resources of one of our counselors from Student Health Services at some time during the semester or throughout the semester. Just a couple more thoughts about COVID itself. I think we're seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, but you may want to also inquire, what has the college's track record been during COVID at keeping students safe, at keeping students learning in person? And one related factor to that is that because during COVID, a lot of colleges didn't meet their admissions targets, some programs and services are going to be on the chopping block. Make sure that the services that your student needs are not in that kind of danger. Ask lots and lots of questions. Don't ever be afraid to ask questions. Just a few more questions. Here, is assistance one-to-one or in a group? There are circumstances in which group support is effective. There are other situations in which I would want one-to-one support that's been customized to my particular student. Who does the academic advising for students who have learning differences? Can students take a reduced course load? For a student with ADHD and with executive function challenges, being able to focus on fewer classes at the beginning of college can pave the way for greater success. Is the college test optional? The good news is more and more colleges are. It started changing during COVID, but many colleges are maintaining their test optional position. So many students, both neurotypical and neurodivergent, don't best showcase their ability to succeed on standardized testing. So if that's important, make sure you're looking at a college that is test optional. And finally, what are the college's retention, graduation, and replacement rates for students who have learning differences? The visit is an extremely important tool in finding a good college match for your students. So visit as many colleges as you can. And fortunately, while you may be only able to visit a certain smaller number in person, most colleges are continuing with their virtual experiences. So that gives you the opportunity to visit more than you would under other circumstances. So I encourage you, visit large and small, urban and rural. Visit traditional colleges that have accommodations through disability services. Visit colleges that have specific programs. Visit a college that's exclusively for neurodivergent students. Attend open houses. They tend to be really full and rich experiences. You'll have the opportunity, depending on the open house, to hear from students. Sometimes there are parent panels, sometimes demonstration classes. Certainly you'll hear from other students. You'll be able to tour the campus, have a real sense of how the college feels. And I think that that's incredibly important. Sometimes college isn't the best next step, and that's a time to start thinking about other options. One of the things that we at Landmark often recommend is that put together an inventory. The student puts together their own, the parents put together theirs, and the school, ask the school if they would put one together too. And on each inventory, on the schools and on the parents, goes the things that you are still doing for your student. On the student's inventory goes everything that they're doing for themselves. Include things like who is responsible for making sure medication is taken, if your student is taking medication. Who is responsible for making sure the student wakes up and goes to school in the morning, things like that. And when you put together these three lists, you will see what needs to move perhaps from the parent or the school list onto the student list for them to be ready. And sometimes it takes a long runway to fully make that transition. So if the student is ready, start looking at the transition programs that are out there. Many partner with a nearby college, university, or tech program for an academic piece of the program, but they can offer more outside the classroom services, coaching, money management, living skills, occupational therapies. So transition programs can be a great next step. So can gap years. Many students, by the time they finish high school, if they have a learning difference, they may have struggled and be really ready for a break from academics. And there are so many opportunities out there that will provide real growth for a student outside the realm of academics. I will be supplying James after tonight also a link to a lot of other resources, and one of them is the National Gap Year Association. So take a look at things that may include travel, volunteering, job internships, and training. If your student is interested in doing a gap year, they should still go through the college admissions process while they are seniors. The whole system in high school is set up to support that timing. And also make sure that the college you're looking at will defer. That's generally not a problem, because what we have learned is that students coming off of a gap year that was a real opportunity for growth come to us more ready to take on the challenges of college, more independent, more self-motivated, and truly, truly ready. James, are there any questions in the chat that we could take before I go on to this smaller Landmark College segment that I want to share with our participants?
No, I haven't seen any questions, but this is a time for the people who are listening. If you do have a question, if you want to just pop it down in the chat now, and we can ask Ferne before we go on to the next segment. So it doesn't look like we have any questions, so we could go on to Landmark College and then do a little question and answer after that.
That sounds great. Thanks, James. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Landmark College right now and describe where Landmark fits in that landscape that I was describing to you earlier. So Landmark is exclusively for neurodivergent students. That means our students may have learning disabilities such as dyslexia. They may be on the autism spectrum. They may have ADHD and executive function challenges. We are a 4-year liberal arts college. Very rigorous curriculum, as I mentioned already. A US News and World Report named us to the top spot in 2 categories for the last 3 consecutive years: best undergraduate teaching and most innovative college, both in regional colleges north. Some fast facts: we are located in Putney, Vermont, on 125 acres. That is both open land, as you see here, and woodlands as well, where our students love to hike and bike. The campus is easy to navigate. All the academic buildings are located around a quad, which is what you're seeing in this photograph. And above, on a hillside overlooking that quad, are our dorms and our dining hall. We have about 450 students from about 38 different states and about 12 different countries. We have an amazing faculty, student to faculty ratio of 6:1, just about unheard of on a college campus. But what that means for students is even more important. It means small classrooms. There is no such thing as a lecture class at Landmark. The average class size is 8 to 12 students, and our classes are dynamic and highly interactive settings. We have 11 associate's and bachelor's degree programs, a range of concentrations. 40% of our students are actually transfer students who have been to sometimes 1, 2, or even 3 other colleges before they land at Landmark, and they come in search of a better college experience. I always think that that's extremely unfortunate, because generally it means they've had some failure, or that they perceive it as failure. So they come to us with their confidence reduced, and it takes a while to build that self-confidence back up. But the number that I am thrilled about and makes me the happiest is that 65%. You may remember that only about 51% of all students, neurotypical and neurodivergent, receive some kind of post-secondary degree that they were pursuing. Only about 1/3 of neurodivergent students do. We see that students who come to Landmark and stay at least through an associate's degree, 65% of them go on to successfully earn a bachelor's degree, and that's an incredible moving of that needle. Some highlights: we have many different paths at Landmark. We know that students may want to engage with us for different periods of time, and we support all of that. So we begin working with high school students to prepare them for college, either in the summer program that I spoke about, that was Erin's point of entry. We also do online high school dual enrollment programs, which are different than the traditional dual enrollment program, in that students are learning from faculty who are experienced in teaching unique learners. And so students are getting the curriculum, the 3 transferable credits, but they're also getting a hidden curriculum of skill building, self-awareness, self-advocacy, and better executive functioning. We have short-term programs for undergrads. One of them is the Bridge Experience. Students may have a particular college in mind, and they come to us for a semester or 2 of intensely focused work to provide them with a strong foundation, to use Landmark as a launching pad so that they can succeed in that other college. TAC is a 1-year short-term program at Landmark that is devoted exclusively to students who are really working on executive functioning. It stands for Transition at College, because the students are earning college credits. They are undergraduates, but it is really, regardless of other diagnosis, very focused on executive functioning skill. We have associate's degree for our students. Some students stay only through an associate's degree because we may not have their major. Others stay through an associate's degree only because they have become self-confident learners who are sure that they know what they need to do to succeed in another environment. And then we have bachelor's programs as well. One of our cornerstone courses is Perspectives in Learning. It's a course devoted to helping students truly understand how they learn. So they look at their strengths, they look at their challenges, they read and study their evaluations and their neuropsych testing. The result of researching and going beyond even their neuropsych is that they develop the particular skills and strategies that they're going to use to serve themselves, not just in an academic environment, but throughout their lives. The community at Landmark is really extraordinary, as you might imagine, because when you get 450 students on a small campus in which everybody is working on some kind of a challenge, everybody gets it. So there is no stigma. There is no fear of being exactly who you are. So it strips away a lot of the anxiety students have previously felt. It is a community in which everyone knows that they are an integral and important part, and nobody is ever on the outside looking in. The work that we're doing at Landmark is informed by the Landmark College Institute for Research and Training. We're the only college in the US that has an institute embedded in the campus that is very specifically studying how to better teach neurodivergent students and how to improve the outcomes. The Institute also serves as a place where many of our students intern and participate as researchers in this cutting edge research. Landmark College looks at neurodiversity as a strength, and the Center for Neurodiversity celebrates that strength. Many of our students call their LD their superpower on our campus. Unique ways of looking at the world and solving problems have so often come from diverse minds, and that is what we celebrate on campus. We also have centers for diversity and inclusion that recognize and celebrate diversity in its myriad of forms. And for all the ways in which Landmark is incredibly unique and different than other college campuses, there are other ways in which we are completely typical. So student life is a completely traditional student life. We have sports, a speaker series, clubs and organizations, social events, trips off campus to places like Burlington, Vermont, New York City, Boston. We have our own study abroad that's led by Landmark faculty and staff. These are 3-week trips during summer and winter breaks where students are going to really incredible places like Botswana, where they're working on a lion and rhino conservation project, Costa Rica, environmental classes. In 2020, January 2020, we had students right before everything shut down in the Caribbean learning how to sail a ship, while another cohort of students was in London on an immersive theater experience. And as soon as we fully resume study abroad, we will be adding Alaska and also New Zealand to our study abroad menu. So Landmark support, I explained that it's embedded in everything we do. So it's comprehensive, it's fully integrated. There are never any additional fees. It starts at its core, there is an advisor model. So every student begins meeting with an advisor as soon as they come on campus. They meet with that advisor weekly, and that advisor will help them set long and short-term goals, help take them through an advising curriculum, will help them if they want with executive function coaching. All of our advisors are trained to do that. Advisors can also point the way towards other forms of one-to-one support that are available on campus. Faculty have office hours as they would on any college campus. In addition, there's our Drake Center for Academic Support, which is different than the centers on many other campuses in that that support is delivered by faculty and professional learning specialists. So support is available for course content there. Support is available for focusing and more executive function skill development. Support for educational technology is available at the Drake Center as well. All of our students have access to counseling through student health services. We have strong residential support system in place. Residential directors are in charge of every dorm, has its own. And in addition, there are student RAs who are available throughout the night so that whenever a student is in need of support, it will be available to them. Our RAs are also responsible for helping students integrate first into their dorm community, but then also into the campus community at large. We have a therapy dog program. We have 9, actually more. We've just added a few more dogs to our therapy dog program. So these dogs are certified. They are handled by staff and faculty, and many of them even have office hours. So if students want to spend one-on-one time with a dog, that is possible too. We have an incredibly robust program of support for students who are on the spectrum. If you would like details about that support, please put a question in the chat, and then I'll dive into that during our Q&A. And then there is Career Connections. Career Connections is the team that will first help students who want to transfer, help them focus in on other colleges that would be a good fit from the point of view of majors, but also from the point of view of a student's learning style. Career Connections, not surprisingly, is also the team that is responsible for employment readiness experiences for our students that are very specifically tied to neurodiversity. They have established relationships with employers worldwide. We have codified relationships with, among other companies, Dell, Hasbro, Ernst & Young, JP Morgan Chase, SAP, and these companies come to campus learning how to create a workplace that is productive and welcoming for a neurodiverse workforce, because they are actively seeking to diversify their talent pool. They also come to campus to interview students for internships. All of our bachelor's degree students are required to do an internship, although they're available to our associate degree students as well. And these internships frequently result in opportunities for career after college. So we are concerned not just with college success, but ensuring that our students have meaningful careers related to their passions after they leave Landmark. And students, alums can continue to use the services of Career Connections even after they have finished their time at Landmark. So that continues to be available. I am going to stop sharing my slides, and I'd love to open this up for your questions. No question is off limits, whether it's about my personal experiences, whether it's about Landmark or more general questions, please feel free to ask. And so James.
We do have a few questions in the chat, and then I have a few as well that I'll ask. But I'm going to start with the first question from the chat. Do you have help for students with avoidance restrictive food intake disorders?
I need a little bit more detail fleshing that one out. Can you help me with that, James?
I'm not sure. I don't know if the person who asked the question would like to unmute and ask it and talk, or if you want to just put more in the chat.
Hi, my name is Jennifer, and I'm an IEC, Independent Educational Consultant in Massachusetts, and I have a student whose family has hired me to help him navigate the college admission process. He has He has a diagnosis, but one of his mother's biggest fears is his this AFRID, the avoidance restrictive food intake disorder, where he only eats very, very limited foods. For example, only vanilla yogurt from Trader Joe's, and only that brand. So I was just wondering if you have had any experience with this at Landmark, or also if you could offer me any guidance on how I can best find, other than a Google search of where's the nearest Trader Joe's to a college campus, if you had any suggestions for me of how I can best help him.
So a couple of things. Is there a primary diagnosis of a learning difference?
I believe his primary diagnosis is Asperger's.
Okay.
He has a 504 at the local high school, but for the most part, if he wants to keep up with classes, he can intellectually.
So this is one of those times, Jennifer, where I want to do my research and go back to the college this week and do some in-depth research, both with what's available at Landmark and take it farther than that. Would you be open to having a meeting with me after tonight to follow up on a particular question?
Absolutely.
Okay, good. James, can you give me an email address out after we're done tonight so that I can reach Jennifer, and we'll set something up, Jennifer, because this is going to take some research on my part.
I'll put it into the chat sheet for you, James. Thank you so much.
Okay, great.
Sure
thanks.
thing.
Thanks, Jennifer, and thanks, Fern. We did have another question on, is foreign language a requirement to get a degree from Landmark? And then just also, what is the acceptance rate for Landmark College?
So whether foreign language is a requirement or not depends on what degree a student is pursuing. So the requirements are different for different majors. One of the languages, however, that we offer is American Sign Language. And that is something that our students have had a great affinity for. So if a language were to be required, American Sign Language is an option at Landmark. As to acceptance rate, it's about 47% right now. I mean, one of the things that we are looking for in students is a student that we feel is set up for success at the college. So we're looking for a student who may not be fully college ready, but is college capable. We're looking for students who have been on a college prep track in regards to their curriculum. And as any other college, we're looking for a student that has a certain modicum of independent living skills. But that results in 47% of our applicants being admitted.
Thank you. And now, I had a few questions, but I have to be honest, once I heard that your therapy dogs had office hours, the only question I had was, what do office hours for a therapy dog look like?
Office hours look like whatever a student wants to do. So usually it's out walking the dog. The dog is available to take out walking or running or playing with, or sometimes playing with them in a building. That's
it is Vermont, so it does get cold in the winter for those walks. So,
but you know what? Our students are young people, and it does not faze them.
That's true.
I saw a question pop up about sports. Did you have one prior to that? Did you have one prior?
You know what? That may have gone directly to you. The question for sports. If you, I don't see that. So if you want to answer that question. Oh no, it is to everyone. How about sports teams? And then do you have an entrepreneurship program?
Okay, so sports teams, yes, we do not do division sports, but we have intercollegiate sports. So we have baseball, basketball, we have a state-of-the-art soccer field, we have cross country. In the winter, this isn't team sport, but in the winter we do shuttle students to Mount Snow, which is not far away, for skiing. So there is an opportunity for sports, and we have a no-cut policy, which means that a student who wants to experience a sport, even if it's not something that they're absolutely outstanding at, can have that experience. It doesn't mean they'll play every game, but we do have very active sports on campus, particularly soccer seems to be very beloved by our students. We do have an entrepreneur program, and I don't have all the details about it, but this is another situation in which I would love to get back to the person who asked that, if I could have if they're open to providing an email, I would get you the details and send them back to you. We also have a degree, a bachelor's degree called Communications and Entrepreneurial Leadership, which has two different strands. One strand is the creative end of communications, the video work, the TV work, film work, all of that kind of thing. And the other is the business entrepreneurial strand of communications. But there's actually a program that will grant students money, funds to carry out their entrepreneurial ideas. They're selected from among a wide range of applicants. There is a committee that will look at funding a certain number of students with these entrepreneurial ideas.
Great. And that, talking about funding leads me to one of the questions I had, and that, do you offer financial aid, and do you offer merit scholarships? I know oftentimes the sticker price isn't what the family is going to pay in the end. So if you can give advice to families on what they may expect, or what financial help there is.
Sure. So great question. One of the nice things at Landmark is that there won't be any surprises in terms of the fees, because there's never going to be an add-on for any additional service that your student might not start to use. So first and foremost, there's all the kinds of government aid that you would expect to be using at any institution you're attending. Then institutionally, there are a few different kinds of aid. One is straight need-based aid, and we award everything from a few $1,000s to full tuition to a small number of students based on the FAFSA and that need. But there is another source of funding called the Presidential Council Scholarship, which can look at factors beyond need. It can also look at some of the things that might normally be included under merit, and that can award up to $10,000 additional per year for students for every year that they stay at Landmark. If a student comes back for a second year, we understand that that's a continued financial commitment. So another pool of money becomes available, and that's the Presidential Persistence Scholarship, which is yet another pool to draw on for families. There are also very specific scholarships for students on particular paths. So there are some STEM scholarships for students, and more of those kinds of scholarships are being created all the time. So there is a good amount of funding available. And as everything else at Landmark, it's a highly personalized process. Our financial aid team works really hard with families to make sure that students who are a good fit and who are really motivated to attend are able to do that.
Great, thank you. Now, earlier on, you mentioned that your son first became willing to apply to Landmark after you sent him to a summer program there. And I think, we're in April, people are starting to look at what they're going to do, or some people already know what they're doing for the summer, but other families are starting to figure out their summer plans. Can you talk about the benefits of summer programs, what type of summer programs Landmark offers, and then what grade you would recommend they start thinking of summer programs? Is it 10th grade, 9th grade, or when?
So our high school summer program is for rising juniors and seniors. So if you've got a sophomore now, you could do this summer. The benefits of the program are multiple. So one of them is students get an experience of working with faculty and staff that understand learning differences. And that's very powerful in and of itself. You know, some students are still thought of in their schools as lazy or like they're not trying hard enough. At Landmark, you know, we get that that's how it can sometimes look, but that's not actually what's underlying some of the challenges students have. So it's an opportunity to develop new skills and strategies, new self-awareness, to begin that path of understanding who the student is as a learner. They do a brain and study skills class in which they really dive into those kinds of strategies. They do a writing class in which students can, depending on the class they opt in for, they can actually start to work on a college essay with support from a faculty member. They also can do they do an elective, whatever they're working on, whatever the course content, there's also always, even in the electives, that kind of skill building element to it. But students also get an experience of residential college life. They can try that out for a 3-week period of time, which is not too long, to see how that feels to them, whether that's something that they want to entertain. Much easier to entertain it for a 3-week summer program than to decide to apply and go to a residential college without having experienced what that might be like. And they experience both, you know, the academic aspects and the recreational aspects of residential college life. So I think those are all of the benefits. Plus, they get feedback from their instructors and their res life staff, so that looking at that feedback, which we'll talk about both what areas they were strong in and what areas might need additional work, that can also give you inklings as to their college readiness and what the best next steps might be. So that's the high school program. And although it sounds like it's early because it's only April, our programs are filling up very, very fast. That summer high school program has both a traditional track and a social pragmatics track. We accept only about 50 students in the social prag track. So that is pretty nearly filling up already. The other kinds of programs that we offer is we offer a college readiness experience, and that's specifically for students who are headed to a traditional college. They've already been accepted. They've already accepted admission for the following fall. It's to get them ready to navigate things like disability services, college syllabi, how to advocate for yourself, all of those things. So that college readiness is something we do that's for students who are going to graduate this June. We also have bridge experiences during the summer for students who are currently already in college but are struggling, to help them again build stronger skills so that they can go back to college in the fall in a stronger position.
Great. Ferne, thank you so much for the information you've shared and for your time tonight. I was wondering if you would be willing to provide your contact information. Perhaps we can put that in the comments in case there are people who wanted to reach out to you. And hopefully you'll be willing to come back again and do another interview.
Yes, I would love that. I am putting my contact information into the chat right now. Hopefully, hopefully it's accurate. The other thing I want to say, James, is I want to make it, just let you know that I love meeting with families. I love meeting with counselors, whether they're IECs or whether they're high school counselors. If there is more that you would like to discuss on a one-to-one basis, I want to encourage you to reach out to me, use that email address. I'm really, really happy to schedule something with you. Also, James, would it be okay if I send you a copy of tonight's presentation, a PDF, and some additional resources so that you could distribute it to people who attend both on this format and on Facebook? You could.
That would be great. Yeah, and then, so I'll send an email out to everyone who registered. So that may be the people who, about half the people who registered attended. So, but we'll send a copy of that presentation as well as a link to the Facebook Live so they could watch the recording of this, and then we'll put that information in the comments on Facebook, as well as I'll be sharing it on a page on the website. So on the website, I'll be able to embed and link all of those other materials.
That sounds great. So I want to thank you all for attending. I know this is a lot of information. Thank you for sticking with this. And James, thank you so much for inviting me.
Thank you very much, and have a great night.
You all too.